Hello, and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about the recently released books. Welcome back. Again, this is Ray Walters. Imagine two evangelists cruising down dusty highways in a beat-up car, answering God's call from one church to the next, armed with prayer, humor, and a toolbox. It sounds like the setup for a buddy comedy, but make no mistake, there's a real ministry, mystery, and spiritual warfare under the hood. When these two friends roll into a small Nevada town called Southwind, they're not just fixing leaky faucets and creaky pews. They're stepping into a spiritual battle that's left a local church cold and a town heartbroken. Joining us today is the man behind this heartfelt and hope-filled story of faith on the move. He's a former military policeman, youth pastor, and radio host, now a debut novelist. Please welcome the author of the book titled Road Trip Evangelist, Ed Wacaster. Hi, Ed. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Ray. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Congratulations in getting this book published.
Well, thank you. It was a long time coming.
All right. How many years did it take you to finish this work, by the way?
I wrote that book 30 years ago. They had it all edited and ready to go to a publisher, but I didn't know who the publisher was. And I lost the CD in a move. And I had another move about 10 years ago, and I found a hard copy of the manuscript that I printed apparently back in the 90s. If you remember those old tractor printers, the paper that you tore off the side with the holes in it, that's what I
Right.
found. That's what I found. And
Okay.
and I had already started writing the sequel, and the sequel I will finish writing the sequel at the end of this month. So it'll be out sometime later this year. But I decided not to do the Star Wars thing and went back and rewrote the original, and that's what came out this past January.
Okay. And let's begin with the heart of it. What inspired you to tell this story about two road weary evangelists? What was there a personal experience or burden that gave birth to Bob and Larry's journey?
Well, there's a couple of things in there that are actually real, not and they're minor, so they're
Mm.
not even worth mentioning here today. But I did prison ministry for about 20 years, and there was one prison that was a 3-hour drive away, and I came up with this idea while I was driving to or fro one day, and just started developing it as I was driving. And so finally, at one point, I sat down with my computer and actually started typing it out. In fact, I don't remember the word perfect. Was that the software? I think that's what it was with the blue screen and the white letters and stuff. That's how long ago it was.
Sounds like word for perfect.
Yeah, it was way back then. So, and
Okay.
then it took me about a year to write it. There's
Mm.
in the very front of the book where the acknowledgments and such like that, there's a story about my wife coming in and waking me up one morning because of where I stopped in the process of writing the book. She was reading it as I wrote it, and I stopped at a certain spot, and she wanted to know more. So,
Let's go back to the friendship between these two protagonists in your book. We have Bob and Larry, because this really anchors the story. So what do you want readers to see in the way these two men interact, not just with each other, but with the people they meet along the way?
right. Well, one of the things that I liked about Bob and Larry as I was kind of developing the characters is that they're about as close to a real Christian as you can get without getting hypocritical, I guess would be the word. They live what they talk about. Um, I've been fortunate enough to have a handful of those people in my life, so I actually know what it looks like, and was able to actually put their characters into those people. Um, Now, the characters are Bob and Larry are nothing like these people that I just mentioned. They are their own people, but they just know how to have fun. They know what's right. They know what's wrong. They do as much right as they can, and
Mm,
they're there for everybody.
that's very wonderful. Now let's go to the town of Southwind. Now, this town is clearly wounded, not just physically, but spiritually. Um, what do you hope readers grasp about the effects of unresolved tragedy on a community's faith and response to the gospel?
One of the things about this story that got me after all this is after writing the book. I'm going back and I'm editing the book and I'm reading it, and that's it's kind of deep in that even though this tragedy happened towards the beginning of the book, as you kind of hear people talk about it once in a while, it's only mentioned not so much until the end of the book, but uh, God's still there. God's still working. He's not gone. And it's one of those one set of footprints. That's all I can see right now. And it always feels like mine, but then when everything's all said and done, you realize they're God's footsteps. It's one of those experiences. And it happened to the pastor as well. The pastor even experienced it himself after that happened. So it rocked the entire town, and it shook his church to the core. It wasn't that big to begin with, but now might as well stay home and watch football.
There's a refreshing sense in this book that God doesn't need theatrics to move in powerful ways. Was that an intentional theme?
Yes, yeah. There were a couple of times when I had written some parts in the book that just created a bunch of drama. And as I'm reading it, you read it and I'm sorry, you write it and you read it and kind of
Mm,
see how it flows. It didn't flow well, and it was actually just a bunch of nonsense. And that's what I've always thought about the drama in a church. Now, keep in mind, one of the things that you did mention, not only have I been a youth pastor, but I've done everything in church except pastor the thing. And I've even filled in for the pastors when they've been gone.
mm.
However, the drama and everything that is behind the scenes that the congregation doesn't see sometimes can be extreme and overwhelming. And I didn't want that in the book. I didn't want that coming through. I kept it as simple as I could, and I'll probably continue that with the series. I have no idea how many sequels are coming to this book. My goal is to write at least one or two a year until it's my turn to go to heaven.
I see. So the way I'm seeing the sequel would be they're going to move into a different town.
The next book already has a name. It's called Mansion, Oregon. So
Mm,
um, my dad lives in the Treasure Valley in Idaho, and until recently I lived in Northern California. And so um, Southwind, Nevada, I have decided is somewhere on Highway 95 between Winnemucca and McDermott, Nevada. So if you've
mm,
been on that road, you know what I'm talking about. It's a lot of
mm.
open space, a bunch of farms, but there's nothing out there but hay and wild cows. And every once in a while, you see a wild cow just walk across the highway. So
Wow.
they're out there. So,
Wow.
and Mansion, Oregon is somewhere in Oregon. I haven't decided where that's at yet.
Okay. Um, I don't want to spoil too much. There are clear moments of spiritual warfare in the story. How do you hope readers come away thinking about the unseen battles happening all around us?
One of the things um, and I did that on purpose. One of the things is at every turn, Satan is there, and Satan is defeated every time. We serve a God that's bigger than God. In fact, if you read in the Bible, the devil was created. God's talking about after he threw him down. You did this, you did that. You had all this on your clothing. You were the most beautiful angel, and I created you. So it just I mean, when you actually sit back and look at it and you put it in the proper perspective, you've got a created being trying to be bigger than the creator.
Mm.
That doesn't even make sense. You can be an absolute ignorant third grader and be smarter than that.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So we serve a great God. We serve the true God, and our God's in control. The devil tries to tell us that he is. He ain't. God's got it all in control. Might not look like it sometimes. He's to our standards. He's got it all under control.
He is sovereign. God is. And the protagonists, Bob and Larry, their role isn't flashy. They fix leaky faucets and preach in small churches. Why was it important to you to highlight this kind of quiet faithfulness?
There's a huge reason why. The mega churches are on TV every week, if not every other day, major networks, and small churches like I have attended almost my entire life are just now starting to come online where they have a live event or a live broadcast for their Sunday morning services. That's about the extent of what they've got. And there's a lot of them that don't even have that. That is the backbone of not only our country, but the backbone of Christianity as a whole.
Mm.
Um, God doesn't need, I don't mean this to sound bad or antagonistic towards megachurches. There's a huge place for them and they serve a huge amount of people. And in a lot of cases, they, they're a huge part of the community as well. Cause they might be large and they might be on TV every week. But they also have those pastors and the leadership of those churches have a big heart. And so they do as
Mm.
much as they can for the community. But the majority of churches in America are small, a couple hundred, maybe some less than that. I know I went to a
Yeah.
church for quite a while that had less than 100 people in it, and it was never going to get bigger because the town was so small. But
Mm.
but God showed up every week. Those people worshiped God. They got into His presence every week, and God doesn't forget those small churches. I mean, um, I don't know. Maybe you've had this experience where you've just been spending time with the Lord in your office or your bedroom or wherever, and suddenly you can feel Him right there in your room. He doesn't
Right.
need an audience. He just needs you and a willing heart. So when those willing hearts come together as as a corporate event, then God shows up in that. That's where He tells us where two or three are gathered, there I am. That's really all He needs.
Right. And I do agree. I do worship, I fellowship in a church that is quite small. If I'm not mistaken, we're less than 100. And I
Uh-huh.
totally appreciate how the setup of that body of Christ is. I firmly believe too that when you are an elder or a pastor or an elder in a church, as an under shepherd, and you know what, a shepherd's life is, he spends most of his time with his sheep. Therefore a shepherd smells like sheep. And I truly believe that that's the relationship between an elder and a an attendee in the church, a church member. And smelling like sheep means your sheep. You're able to pastor them well. You know them by name. You're able to talk to them whenever they have problems. In mega churches, the way I see it, it's kind of like a little bit difficult to do that. You have a pastor, but you have a very big congregation. So there's a lot that goes on. But I appreciate going to a small church where I can personally meet the elder or the pastor.
Right, right. I heard one of the first quote unquote mega churches that I was aware of was in Sacramento area, and I can remember hearing the pastor of that church on the radio. One of the shows that I used to listen to on local Christian radio. Someone said, "So how do you like being the pastor of a large church?" He says, "I don't like it." He says, "I don't know everybody that comes to my church. I used to know everybody, and now this church has just exploded. I don't know who half of them are." He says, I know their faces, but I don't know their names. I don't know anything about them. And I don't like that. He says, but he says it's a position. It's not anybody's fault. It's just that's where we are. But he didn't. But he was so. And I played golf with the guy a couple times at some men's ministries uh, functions, and he was just a nice man. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell that he was pastoring a church of thousands. He was just the nicest guy. He had no personality, or no, I shouldn't say huge personality. He was a guy that you would see most days, quote, similar to the guy that you see most days working on his car in the garage. He was just a guy, and and he was comfortable in his skin. Um, then I brought that up one time. I mentioned that that to him about what I heard on the radio. He says that's probably going to be my biggest, quote unquote, this is my word, not his, probably his biggest regret in life, getting the church getting too big where he didn't know everybody. He enjoyed being able to look at somebody and say they're having a bad day because he knew them well enough. And those days were gone. He could do it with his staff, but he couldn't do it with the congregation.
Ed, speaking of or pastors, Pastor Brown in your book is such a steady figure in the story. What makes a shepherd like him stand out in a time when many churches are wrestling with apathy or division?
One of the things that I thought about Pastor Brown after I had written the book, I didn't really mean to make him such a steadfast person, and I realized I had done that after the book was written. So it was an accident. But here's a guy that stuck with the town in the church when most pastors would have thrown in the towel and left, and he was ready to do that when Bob and Larry showed up. He was about there. My current pastor is the sectional presbyter or whatever. And when he mentioned not too long ago that he gets calls almost every Monday of pastors that want to quit.
Mm.
Everything you do is wrong. Everything you do is right. It just depends on who you're talking to. But the criticism sometimes can be harsh, it can be cruel, and it can be absolutely totally unfounded. And it's a difficult position. Um, Pastor Brown had done all that and heard the criticism. And at this point, he just didn't see any point being there because nothing was happening. His church had died because of that tragedy. And it took the sell out of it. It hurt him as well. He even mentions that. It hurt him as well. It was just, it wasn't right. And it happened. And I'm not going for that.
Okay. Well, Ed, there's a sense of timing in the book. Bob and Larry show up when they're needed, not when it's convenient. So again, it's a good thing. That timing, they know when they're needed, or they show up at the right time when they are most needed, not when it's convenient for them. Let me ask you this. Was that a reflection on how you see God's providence at work in real life?
Yes, exactly. In fact, that's mentioned several times in the Bible about God's timing. I used to have a pastor that used to say God's the slowest person he ever met, but he's never late. And that's the case here. We can go, we can go, we can go. God, I'm praying. My prayers are hitting the ceiling. I'm not feeling anything. I think I'm just going to go. Boom, Bob and Larry show up. It's right on time. It's almost perfect timing. Um, it could be a little different, but in this case, it was the perfect time for them to show up. The town, here's the thing. Bob and Larry don't have an ego, and they never will. And they showed up to this town kind of unexpectedly. They didn't expect to, they just went in to meet Pastor Brown. They just wanted to say hi because they were there. And they didn't expect to stay. Pastor Brown poured his heart out. They kind of looked at each other, gave each other the look, I think is how I put it. And they knew it was time to stay. They needed them, or the town needed them. And the town was full of good people. There's a ton of them in the books, some characters from town that are just great people. Some not so great, but great people.
The book does not shy away from brokenness, whether it's personal, communal, even generational. But there's hope in the mix too. So, how do you balance honest storytelling with the promise of redemption?
This is where storytelling comes in, and it's not a personal experience. Being a minister as long as I was, you can see the brokenness, and you can see people absolutely shattered. Their life shattered because of a death, because of an injury, or just circumstances that just are tragic and very unpleasant to go through.
Mm.
And they can't see God anywhere. Where's God right now? I've had that question asked me, where's God right now? He's sitting right next to me. Well, how come I don't feel it? Because you're not feeling it right now. Sometimes those are the hardest times to sit back and say, God's here. I know He's here. I know He's going to get me through this. I can't feel it right now. So that's where faith comes in. So there's a stretch of the faith in here with some of the characters, a huge stretch of the faith, and that's where you get that faith from your daily devotions. 10 or 15 minutes a day, just prayer and Bible study, or just prayer and reading the Word, but sincere. Um, God's God doesn't hear your fluff. He doesn't hear, oh God, how great you are. If you say it with just quick and oh God, you're really great. I got to go now. He's not. That has no weight with him. But
Mm.
if your heart is, Father, I'm going to have a great day today because you're going to be with me. I know that you love me and I know you're with me and you'll take care of me everywhere. You say it somewhere to that with sincere heart, you're going to have a great day. So, and that was part of the stuff I hope came out of that book. And I think I was pretty, I don't want to say really clear in it with Bob and Larry, um, but that's a lot of the message.
And I also noticed that much of the transformation in the book happens through the ministry of the word, prayer, and genuine community. Was that intentional? Do you think modern readers are still hungry for that simplicity?
One of the things that I did in the book, and I did this on purpose while I was writing it. Back in the 90s, I did this on purpose. Now, keep in mind that back in the 90s, I was a youth pastor, associate pastor, worship pastor, all the pastors at my church. And one of them, I was all that at the same time. But I also did prison ministry during that time, did that for 20 years. And the lives that I saw that were broken and the realness that I saw, even in the churches that I went to, I remember, here's a little sidetrack. Youth pastor at a church in Marysville, California. The guy goes to the church. He keeps asking me, will you go to prison ministry with me? Well, that sounded about as boring as watching grass grow or paint dry. Sometimes I say grass dry and paint grow. Um, that's because my sense of humor. But um, finally, I just relented and I went. And I got to tell you, it was one of the best church services I had ever been in. Those prisoners showed up. They brought God there. The Holy Spirit showed up in the prison, and that was because of those guys. It was I didn't bring it. I mean, I did, but it
Mhm.
wasn't because of something that I did or my friend Howard that talked me into coming. Um, those guys were truly serving God in there, and it was a great church service. And so, getting back to the book, it life sucks sometimes, and I'm being very polite. I mean, if we were in a different setting, I wouldn't do it, but stronger language is indicated here sometimes. Life can get really difficult, and you take a look over there and go, I don't know how that guy hasn't killed himself yet. Even as a pastor, I've said that. Now, God's really been good to them. We can lean on God when it looks good, and we definitely can look at God when it's going bad.
Right.
Um, I'm going through some things personally right now that have nothing to do with me, but other people are involved. That end of life stuff, and it's sad to watch. Um, but since they're Christians, it's okay. It's more of a, hey, this guy's getting ready to go to heaven. So there's some smiles instead of some really sad people sitting around moaning and groaning and with tears. It's not necessarily the worst thing. It's not fun, but um, death is sad. You my father-in-law, before he passed away, used to say that death is the last dirty trick the devil will play on him or the her.
Yeah, I do agree. Life does, it's difficult. And one thing I've learned as a Christian is that when you become a Christian, life does not necessarily change. But what changes is that there's joy living a Christian life in being a Christian in a harsh life that we have. And absent in the body is present with the Lord, and death to a Christian is but the start of eternal life. And every Christian, genuine believers anticipate that. And that's the joy that we have as Christians. But to some people who has not yet known Christ, they see death as something to be feared, and truthfully so. I mean, this is a short life. It's a due. We're here in the morning, midday, we're already gone. And that's how fast paced life is. You just don't know what's going to happen next. You're not assured that tomorrow's going to come in, but the joy comes in knowing that you have Christ, and the righteousness of Christ is imputed on you, not because of your own merit, but because God gifted it to you. It's grace. And that's the beauty of, for me, a Christian's life is there's always joy amidst the sufferings, amidst
Right,
the hardships that we're going
right.
through.
Christians' funerals, I've used this word for decades. Christians' funerals are bittersweet. You hate to see them die. We do, but at the
Yeah.
same time, you're happy for them because you know where they're at. How can you be sad for that person? We're sad for us because we're going to miss them. I mean, it's our loss. It's their gain. It's our loss. When you put it in the proper perspective, and Paul did a really good job with that. You know, to to live as Christ, to die as gain. Um, and time stops when we make it into eternity. There's no clock. I and and I heard a cowboy one time say, if there's a clock in heaven, I'll guarantee you it's got a bunch of bullet holes in it because we don't need it. Some of that cowboy logic, I guess.
Ed, you've written this book with a lot of warmth and humor, even when the stakes are high. Why do you think those lighthearted moments matter in a story that deals with the heavy truths?
If you've got a peace in your heart about God and your life is in a spot where you know God's in control, you can laugh at just about anything, and you can do it appropriately. When you look at things in the perspective of eternity, a huge percentage of what we're doing here on Earth doesn't matter because it's not going to matter when we get there. The thing that matters is we got Christ in our heart when we pass away. We get to go live with Him, and all those people that are waiting for us. I remember not too awful long ago, my father-in-law passed away when he was 61, very young, and
Mm.
we were having a birthday party for his wife who had just turned 90, and I stole this line from somebody, but I told anybody have something they want to say about her? I went, well, yeah. I mean, her husband's been gone so long. He's thinking she didn't make it. I mean, silly things like that. So, of course, there was the whole rumor erupted, and that wasn't. I didn't think that up. I stole that from somebody else. So, is it funny? Yeah. And she's now since passed on. That was a few years ago. So, I think
Uh,
she made it to 92, and
wow.
so she finally made it. And then I was teasing her daughter. She says, "So what do you think their conversation is going to be like when they get there?" I said, "Well, he's probably going to say, 'You look familiar. Do we know each other?' 'Yeah.' 'Were we friends?' 'Well, we were married, so I'm not thinking we were.'" So silly things like that. Humor everywhere.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know, I might have spent, not only was a military policeman, but then I spent 6 years in the reserves as a drill sergeant.
Mhm.
So my sense of humor is probably a little more twisted than most. And one of my friends was reading the book, and they said, your personality is all over that book. I said, I don't know how it wouldn't. So, so a lot of that book is my personality, I guess.
Ed, to close, when readers turn the last page and sit with what they've just experienced, what's the one thing you hope stays with them? And also for those who want to pick up a copy or maybe reach out to you personally, where can they go? How can they get in touch with you?
To get in touch with me, they can go to my website. They can also get my book there, at wacaster.com. So there's in the upper right, there's a place to contact me, and there's just a little, put your information in there and you can type a little note. I don't know if there's a limit to how many characters you can put in there, but it is kind of a small box. I haven't written myself a letter in there yet, but yeah, you can contact me there. If you want to leave me your contact information because you want to talk to me, I would really prefer to do an email first, not a phone. Um, so you can get me there. I did not write this book for money. Most of the money that's coming from this book is going to a nonprofit organization that buys vehicles for missionaries. So I didn't do it for the money. Um, I wrote this book so that people could get saved, and that's why there's so many sermons in there, and they're short. And because I'm not long-winded. I usually preach 20, 25 minutes. I'm done. So if you ever want to come hear me preach because you got 20 minutes and you hear I'm in the area, come listen to me preach. I promise you'll laugh. I tell jokes, but
Yeah.
there's an altar call at the end as well. The idea behind this book is to get people saved. One of the guys I grew up with sent me a thing. Uh, I put it out on my Facebook page. Hey, my book's out. Blah blah blah. He and I grew up together. Not a Christian, not even interested in becoming a Christian. So I was kind of surprised when he said he's going to get it. Well, he read it. He got saved. He got radically saved. That's why I wrote that book. And I hope I hear thousands more of those stories.
Thank you so much, Ed, for your time, for sharing to us your book. It's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Well, it was a pleasure being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. There you have it, folks. Ed Wacaster. I also want to give a big shout out to our awesome viewers and listeners for joining us for this interview. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations on the Book Connection Show. I'm Ray Walters. Join me next time as we explore the world of self supported publishing, one indie author at a time.